Hey everybody, welcome to Randy Sands and the Mediumship crew. And you guys are probably seeing that I'm in here twice. I'm really not. I'm on the iPad because my computer decided to freeze and was giving a little difficulty. But the crew would like to welcome you. And we also are blessed to have our special guest, Stacy Schuerman Kopchinski. That's all a tongue twister for me, and I love her to pieces.
SSK.
Yeah, right. And tonight we're going to do an in-depth talk on the Fox family. And the Fox family, in my opinion, they were absolute pioneers for modern-day spiritualists and mediums alike. And Stacy was kind enough to decide she would come in every third Monday of the month. And Stacy, before we get started, I just want to tell you, we had talked about doing a different pioneer from each state. And I just want you to know that that would be 50 months, which I'm completely down for. But I want you to know that that's longer than some relationships I've had.
Nice.
I mean, I'm totally down with it. I'm just that I did the math.
That's great. I love it.
Right? Me too. So the Fox family was John Fox, his wife, Margaret, and they had actually rented a house in the Hydesville area temporarily while their home was being built. And they had multiple children, but two lived in the house with them. And that was Margarita and Kate. And they both went by full names. So Margarita also went by Maggie. Kate also went by Kathy. Hold on a second. Honey, could you please deal with her because I have to do out here instead of in my office. Sorry, I have a cat with a thyroid issue. So they rented a house. It wasn't long before some interesting things started happening. So I'm going to go ahead and have Stacy take over. Oh, and anybody, please feel free to, chime in if there's something you want to say. The only thing that we ask is that you do it via chat so that we're not all talking over each other.
Perfect. So before we get right into the Fox sisters, I really want you to try to imagine what it was like in 1848, especially for women, because you have to almost kind of think about, that time, that society, what that, women had pretty much no rights. They were starting to fight for rights, but again, that was pretty limited in its context. They couldn't own property. They couldn't vote. Anything that was theirs became their spouses when they married. So, I always try to think about the time period that we're going to talk about, because the Fox family, especially the Fox sisters, Leah, Maggie, and Kate, have they lived long lives, and they had a life of turmoil, ups and downs, goods and bads. And I think a lot of times they're ostracized for people who are trying to debunk spiritualism or to try to debunk mediumship, but they're not really looking at the time period and everything that these women, these children really, young women, children, what they had to go through to start this huge movement for all of us to now openly talk on Zoom about mediumship and what that's like to connect to the spirit side. So I always like to give that little tidbit of history, getting started, if you would, kind of setting the scene. And where this happened in New York. It's not like New York City. It's not a very populated area. It's actually, oh, and I forgot a book, but I'll show it, or I'll make sure I type it to Randy. It's, you know, this is like a country, a wee little town, you know, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Rochester, New York, which is probably the biggest city that was close to, still wasn't necessarily a 20-minute horse ride. You know, it took some time to get there. So when these rappings or these knockings occurred, like Randy said, the family moves in to kind of set the stage. Leah, the oldest sister right above Maggie and Kate, she lived in Rochester at the time. She was out of the house. So it was just Maggie and Margaret, or Margaretta, whatever you want to call her, and Kate, that lived in the house with their mom and dad. Now they were, I would say, middle class, lower middle class. He had a business. They were building a house. They, you know, were renting this house in Intram. But they weren't wealthy by any means. And they also, you know, he was also very much a well-known alcoholic for the area. So when these rappings started taking place, it was more so the two girls and the mom that were paying attention to it. And of course, we all know the famous date, right? March 31st, 1848 was the day that basically the communication portal opened up, where we realized that we are communicating with an intelligence, with a spirit that is intelligent and knows exactly what's going on, and aware of not only his it was at the time his earthly existence, but also very much aware of his spiritual existence. And so the rappings continued kind of for days. But one of the things I always like to kind of talk about is in New York City, the night of March 31st into the morning of, Andrew Jackson Davis, who is somebody else we can talk about, which is, he's a fun character to talk about. I shouldn't say character, he's a great man, but never a spiritualist, but promoted the spiritualist movement. And it was that morning, I actually have it here quoted, that very day that the Fox sisters communicated with that male spirit known to be Charles B. Rosna. Andrew Jackson Davis wrote in his diary, he says, about daylight this morning, he confided to his diary, a warm breathing passed over my face, and I heard a voice, tender and strong, saying, brother, the good work has begun. Behold, a living demonstration is born. And that is tied to the exact date of the communication that happened in the Fox, that evening in the Fox cottage, which is pretty cool, I think, you know? So it's, again, that big orderly intelligence is making everything compile. And for more consistent nights, not just March 31st, they were pretty much every night bombarded by the rappings of the spirit communication. They started having their neighbors over, and now I wish, oh, I did bring it. Okay, so I just found this book, and I'll give you a ton of information to read, because what really is true about the Fox sisters, you need to decide what is your truth. I know and I believe strongly in what they did for us, and I make that my truth, but I'm a person who's also a little healthy and skeptical, like facts, like things, like to put things together. So I'm going to suggest a ton of books throughout this evening to kind of have you find your own truth. However, I came across this book. I don't know. I'm sorry it's backwards. Yeah, it says, a report of the mysterious noises heard in the house of Mr. John Fox in Hydesville. And this is all written statements from all the neighbors that came over to bear witness to this communication.
You know, another one that is very similar is Missing Link.
I was gonna, yeah, Leah, the middle child, because there's actually two, the older brother and another sister who passed to spirit, but you're right, Missing Link, Leah wrote that book.
Who wrote that book, if you don't mind me asking, Stacy?
Well, it seems like that this was published by E.E. Lewis, and it's put together all the accounts. And actually, you know, it's interesting. It's copyrighted Kate Fox, San Francisco, California.
Interesting.
I do know I bought this at the Lilydale bookstore, and their bookstore's online right now, just saying. So, you know, but it's very interesting to read. Of course, it has a letter of Mrs. Fox and then a letter from Mr. Fox, their witness statements to what had happened, but then all these different neighbors. And I'm telling you, these neighbors, can you imagine? Just think of your own neighbors. Like, how many of you invited into your house? Like, hey, come to my bedroom and listen to these knocks, you know?
Maybe Sandy. Sandy's my neighbor, so I'd probably.
Like, can you imagine just inviting these random people into your house to like bear witness to this knocking, which I find fascinating, you know?
Or better, could you just imagine? Those poor dears had no clue what was about to happen when they started inviting people into their house.
Right? Oh my gosh.
Exactly. And there's been,
Look at what here, I didn't even realize.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, okay.
That is a very good book. Yeah, that is a very good book also. So Maggie and Kate at the time, now there is a little overall debate on how old the girls were exactly. Most of the time you're going to hear that they were 14, Maggie being 14 and Kate being 11, give or take a year. You know, back then too, again, go back to the time, it wasn't like there were all these great records, you know, of when they were born or, you know, what years and that kind of stuff. But this plays an important role as we start moving on in the life of the Fox family. Because what happened is they thought, okay, they're going to separate the girls for a time and, to see if that would quiet the rappings. So one sister stayed home, one sister went to live with Leah. You know, it just didn't matter. The noises still continued. So Maggie and Kate go and live with Leah in Rochester. Leanne, you're from Rochester, right?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, and Sandra too. Yeah. So they go to Leah's house and stay with Leah. And at that time, again, you always got to think about the social standards, like what's going on in that time. That was right at the brink, if you would, or when the flames started really starting to fire for women's suffragette movement, for the abolishment of slavery movement, for just human freedom, really. Religious freedom. We had different religions forming all over. Western New York is actually considered the hot box for many different, you know, for Mormonism. What's some other ones? Millerisms. Well, there's spiritualism. The Seven-Day Adventists were, you know, it was all kind of being created in that Western area. So Leah invites over some of her friends. Now, they're actually known as Isaac and Amy Post, who had a very big, strong political stance, knew a lot of up and coming people, had, oh my gosh, I mean, just, and they had money to help contribute to all of these causes. Well, they sat in on a seance that was done with the girls. And, you know, Isaac Post. Now, they weren't, I want to say, what were they? Quakers, I believe. Does somebody know? Yeah, to confirm that they were Quakers, because there's a few different religions I'm going to talk about between all of this, but they were Quakers. So they already believed in at least that spiritual movement, that spiritual connection. Now, this was fascinating to them because it was proving that continuity. You know, it wasn't just like God or spirit giving it to me, but it was Joan Crawford or, you know, or, you know, it was people specific, right? Like, so they were really kind of, and they had a lot to do with kind of the success. What happened is, so Leah kind of became their manager. Again, think about this. I mean, I love my sisters. Can you live with your sister 24/7? Can you work with your sister 24/7? And can your sister manage you 24/7? So this is,
and craziness that was going on top of that.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. So Isaac Post kind of put together the very first seance or public demonstration of mediumship to occur in Rochester, New York at Dodgeworth Hall, and 400 people attended to watch this communication, and it was amazing. But again, I remind you of the time. These two girls, 11, because this was not even, well, maybe this was a year later. So depending on their birthday, you're talking, 12, 15, 11, 14. They were taken in back, stripped of their clothes, looked over by men, put back into their skivvies, and then put on to the platform to demonstrate this mediumship.
Incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's just like, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm 42 and I probably would be just like mad as heck to do that. And they're 11 and 14, But needless to say, the girls go out and, they really kind of almost became an overnight sensation, right? Because we have all of this now, everybody wants to hear from their loved ones, and you have people dying, civil wars going on, mass casualties, just even the life expectancy wasn't that long.
And it even amazes me as you're talking about that, the way that word got out. I mean, from Rochester with a group of 400 people to across, the country by horse, basically, you know what I mean, that this is going on. I thought, right? I mean, that alone is amazing. I can imagine, how like you played that game as a kid, like the telephone game, and it was so messed up by the time it got to the end. I could just imagine what the story was, by the time it made someone else. But that's incredible.
And it was go ahead, Randy.
I'm sorry, honey. What's also interesting is Leah was a widow twice by the time she was 24 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she made money being a music teacher. Well, for a while, until she, managed her sisters. Wow. And there's so much to learn. I haven't read every single book. I'm still uncovering. I mean, I just uncovered this book and I'm like, what? What is this? So there's so much to uncover because like Leon said, papers are being shown now, letters are being found, diaries are being, there's just so much coming out. And that's where I say, really dig and find your truth, because, the Fox sisters really were put through the ringer, and still sometimes are put through the ringer for, some of the choices they made in their lives. And I'm thinking, we're just starting here, and I'll tell you a little more, and then, but to go through put yourself in their shoes and to go through everything they had to go through to prove this movement,
and what a lot of people don't realize is there was a lot that went on even before that. So when Mr. Rosna let them know where he was buried, and when they started digging, somehow a huge angry mob appeared, and the men were there digging, and the women formed a barrier, and somehow they kept the mob out. But I mean, imagine this. And at the end of the day, when they went to exit the home, the angry mob was out there, and they all stood there waiting for whatever was going to happen, and Spirit took care of the mob. The mob didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. So they had to deal with that, with, feeling threatened, their lives, what have you. When Katie or Kathy or Catherine, whichever name she wants to go by this minute, went with Leah to her house, guess what happened? The Spirit moved over to Leah's house, and they started having Leah being a musical teacher, I'm sure helped with this, but they started having performances, Spirit did, in her home at night. And Spirit was not always warm and fuzzy, because there were times when they had fruits and vegetables thrown at them and what have you at night.
Yeah.
So they really went through a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of just continued. I mean, Spirit did guide them, at least get the right people within their circle, within their protection, because eventually they went to New York City, where they met Horace Greeley, who was also a big supporter. But this is where kind of also the scientists started coming in. They ended up going to England, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, you know, and then they even went through more testing. But when Emma Harding Britton was in, who's another kind of pioneer of spiritualism, when she was in New York and met, I believe it was Maggie, she was at Maggie's seances, because they set up at a hotel and they did seances 3 times a day, at 10 p.m., at 5 p.m., and at 8 p.m. every day. And it was $1 to get in. And it was, you know, so I think the girls took turns. I'm not sure exactly. I can't find the complete detail, but I know it was $1 to get in, up to 20 people, 3 times a day, doing the, you know, doing seances. And when Emma saw her, she said, what a channel for spirit, because at this point now, you know, this is like 10 years into it, you know, 10 years after the event, women started becoming mediums. Like you said, it just spread like wildflower all the way to the West Coast, and quickly. And mediumship just kind of came out of nowhere. They were saying that, I think at one point, I think it was after the war, they were thinking about like 2 million people consider themselves spiritualists, but 8 million actually followed the movement of spiritualism. So, I mean, we were really in a race, if you would, for a religion aspect too. Leah looked at more of the religious aspect. Maggie and Kate looked at more of the science, the connection, doing the mediumship, producing the phenomena, connecting both worlds. Not that Leah couldn't do it, because I think she probably did. That's my opinion. You know, I think she had her own ways, like even Randy saying, playing music, being present. I think Leah had the capability too. And then they traveled as far as St. Louis. I don't think they went any farther west that I can find, but the sisters did do a tour. They went through Ohio, they came to Chicago. St. Louis is the farthest I could find. But they went on tour, and they were strapped to machinery. They were, I mean, their life was picked apart, you know, because the scientists wanted to prove it. And a lot of scientists like Sir William Crookes, some names are escaping me right now, but some other test scientists like in the research, like, did not debunk them. They said, no, I don't know where they would, like, this is the most accurate reading I've ever received. So they both did it. Now, I want to talk a little bit, because a lot of people talk about how the sister recanted, or the sisters recanted. And I want to kind of talk about how that came to be, and when that came to be. So when in New York, Maggie became, well, I shouldn't say became, she became the infatuation of a man. Let me just pull up my timeline here, because it's very important. I don't think people know this very much. And I always want, because this is a book, I'm going to quote a book for y'all to kind of find and read too. So Maggie caught the attention of Elijah Kent King, who actually, if you Wikipedia him, he's actually an explorer and has a couple books published to going to the Antarctica, right? 13 years her senior he was. And he met her, but he was a Puritan, so he didn't believe in anything she did. She believed, he believed that what she was doing was in a way false against the Bible, but he wooed her. There's actually a book called The Love Letters of Mr. King, which if you can get and read, it was put out. It was all the letters he wrote to Maggie. And only a few of Maggie's responses are actually published in the book. But again, seek your own truth. But read this, because this starts to play into how the sisters got tired, how they got ran down, how they got manipulated, or just, I think manipulated. I'll say that, because when I read this book of love letters, to me, this is somebody kind of combing somebody or trying to form or shape somebody.
Well, and it probably wasn't very hard when you're doing three seances a day for how many years. It probably didn't take a whole lot.
No, plus on top of that, there were the private seances, there were the test seances, and the thing is the girls kind of almost in a way had to produce.
Mm-hmm.
They had this need to produce, so ideally what happens is Kate is kind of the first one to break away. Or I'm sorry, Maggie's the first one to kind of break away, because she in Tales kind of falls in love with this Mr. Kent, right? Mr. King, and actually gets married, common law married to him. See, this is where the weirdness comes in. So we believe they got married in 1855. He dies 1857.
Oh, wow.
Right? And he, because he was an, whatever those people are, those explorers, and he was out and, his family doesn't like her. Like, just doesn't like, she's not a Puritan. She is this, so she
talking to dead people. Yeah,
right. So
random.
What does she do? She gives up her job for love.
Oh.
I think we've all made stupid mistakes and choices in love, or thought what was love, or who knows what, right?
Yeah.
So she kind, so she goes to England. He dies, and this is where it said that she recanted to join the Catholic Church to maybe more so pay favor so she can be acknowledged as his widow.
Oh.
Not as bad as what Maggie does here in a minute, but we'll get into that. And again, I say, read these books, read these, read these letters, read the recant statement, and then how she recants it, takes it back less than over a year later, just over a year later, Maggie's going to take back everything she ever said. Right. But you got to kind of try to put yourself in their situation, where they're at, what they've been doing, what they want to continue to do, but yet they want to feel normal. I don't know about all of you. I mean, I am out of that spiritualist closet. My family knows I'm a minister. I was raised Catholic, and Baptist, and my family chooses to be Catholic. It's still that kind of like, is it the first thing out of your mouth? Like, hi, I'm a minister who believes in the communication with the dead. How are you? Like, you don't really do that very often, right? So can you only imagine the pressure these women are under?
Yeah. Wow.
For just years, decades, they grew up in this. So in England, Kate actually goes over, meets with Maggie, tries to kind of bring Maggie back, if you would, right? Like, to kind of back to, mediumship. And, Maggie's not sure. She's not really surviving very well. Kate, on the other hand, in England, finds a spouse, they get married, he's a spiritualist. Her mediumship blossoms over in England. She's not doing it as regimented as she did back here in the States, but she's doing it nonetheless, and she's literally getting materialization, lighted figures in the room, being studied, but yet has the husband now to balance her, right? So there's a few years of some really good mediumship with Kate, and Kate is talking to Maggie. In the meantime, her husband passes away. She has 2 small kids, Kate does. You know, here we go. We're gonna work. What do? We do readings. We do circles all day, every day, you know, to pay the rent, to make bills meet. What do? You have a glass of wine at the end of the night to settle down, to calm down. So both of the women have kind of started into, you know, drinking pretty heavily, just to help cope with their daily living. Both widows. Leah, this is like, it's like kind of it's a soap opera. It's the spiritual soap opera, I tell you. So Leah, you know, still good old Leah, back in New York, ends up trying to get Kate's children taken from her because she was concerned about the drinking, how much Kate had been drinking.
Meanwhile, let's look at Leah for a second. This is a person that when she brought Kate to live with her and all this started going on, she thought that the house was haunted, just like the one in Hydesville. So what does she do? She tells the agent to find her a new house that has not had any crimes, because she was thinking this had to do with murder, right? So what does she do? I must be getting feedback from you.
Yeah.
She buys that was backed up to the Buffalo burial ground.
Oh, geez. Here's your sign. Yeah. Not a good idea. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Maggie comes back to New York, where she is offered $1,500 to say she faked it.
Wow.
And now you're looking at what? When was this? Hold on, let me look at my timeline.
That's like $1 million now.
Yeah, 1888. So this is when she was offered, probably a couple days before that, but in October 21st of 1888, an interview was published. She had went out on stage at the New York Academy of Music and basically said, we faked it. And here's how we did it. And she proceeded to show how she could crack her toe. Now, this is what's interesting. So this is where I say, this is where do your research, right? And come up with your own truth. I have mine, but I always say find yours. Her thing is that that her and Kate were cracking toes all along. However, because they worked so hard at it for all those years, those tendons and muscles got louder. But yet, at the music hall, it was the quietest raps they ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
So science loved it, like, haha, you faked it, you're cracking your knuckles or you're cracking your toes. But yet, this was the quietest raps that have been ever heard. So it doesn't make sense because you're talking, what, almost 30, 40 years later, you're talking exactly 40 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and it's quieter when it should be louder because the tendons, the muscles, the joints would get bigger and stiffer and louder. not quieter. So she basically says, no, at this point, Kate is just really kind of devastated. She's trying to keep her children. She's fighting with her family. She's hello, like, I don't know who wouldn't be having, a meltdown, if you would, and is kind of continuing to drink. In November, the following year, November 16th in 1889, Maggie takes back, pulls back and says, I lied. I needed the money. This was the way to do it. I recant. I do believe in spirit communication. And I am a spiritualist, and again, though, to some, it was a day late, dollar short. A year later, everybody who could. And like Randy was saying too, you got to remember, you have the religious movement going. And when spiritualism became so popular, guess what? It's going to be what do you mean you can't? What do you mean you're responsible for your own sins? What do you mean there's not a punishing God? What do you mean? Only, everyone can talk to people. So that whole religious movement was also, being, trashed or debunked by major religious organizations because it didn't give them the power, right? Because I always believe spiritualism gives you the freedom. Most religions want to be in control of you. So yeah. So then there's that aspect going on too, So needless to say, there was the sisters, in a way, especially Maggie and Kate, their bond became strong. But they ended up passing to spirit. Ironically, all three of them passed within a couple years. I have it right here because I wanted to get that, because I think it was Leah. So some accounts say that Kate never reconciled with her sister Leah before Leah passed. Some say they did reconcile. I don't know. I don't think my family drama is going to be publicized for people to look up after I'm gone.
Right.
I'm thinking whoever's living is going to tell the story that works for them, like, oh yeah, my sister, yeah. So Leah died first. She died in 1890. And then 2 years later, Kate went, and 8 months later, Maggie passed.
Wow.
And sadly enough, though, like Kate did die because of alcohol poisoning, alcoholism. She did. And Maggie passed later, not, I think, more of natural causes. Now, Kate and Maggie are buried both in New York. And interesting enough, Marilyn Autry was a big, she's a minister from Florida, actually, Orlando area. They found the headstone of the Fox sisters, and they were able to completely restore it because it had fallen pretty bad to the wayside. And Randy went from one room to another. Good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they restored the headstone, and the cemetery, I should have had the cemetery's name. I'm sorry, I don't have it in my notes. If somebody knows it, please say. But the cemetery is like one of the most famous New York cemeteries. There's a lot of famous people buried in there. And they were able to get the sisters to be celebrities on the list. So they have a golden plaque that they were the two young women who started the movement of modern spiritualism. And then back to the cottage real quick, because it was after the women passed, because we could talk a whole segment just on the cottage itself. In 1904 is when they actually discovered the bones, the remains of the peddler who was murdered. And that was because I think the cabin was being not torn down, because it was moved to Lilydale in 1916, but it was in 1904 that they actually found the bones, because they were digging, like Randy had said, but never really found it because there was kind of this hidden wall. And I don't know if they were redoing the foundation when it fell out, or
every time they would start digging, the water would come up.
That's right. Flooded. Yeah. Flooded. So yeah, so there's a lot more to the Kate and Maggie. Like I'm fascinated by them. And then there's Leah. I mean, because like I said, Leah wrote the book Missing Link, which is a great book too. You know, I am surprised how many people don't know about Cypress Hill Cemetery. Thank you. Yes.
Yes,
Diane.
I was just looking it up.
Yes, Diane, you are correct. Thank you. Yes. So if you get a chance, if you're from that area, or if you ever get a chance to go see the headstone, I would. We have perpetual care on it, and flowers are put there every March 31st, and will be hopefully from now until eternity. Yeah. But, you know, really dig into, I think it's fascinating. I think it's just fascinating. And I think that these women who started out as children took upon their shoulders a weight that none of us would even know how to bear. So I am eternally grateful for their power to stand in their truth as long as they do. And we all fall down. We all make mistakes. So why? And that's one thing I love about spiritualism, is it's not about a godly, saintly person. It's a group of people who started a religious movement, and we're all going to have flips and flops in our lives. And I think that it's so sad that sometimes they get so chastised because of maybe the last few years of their lives, with not looking for the decades that they gave to service, to spirit, and to us.
Exactly. You know, and as far as the paranormal world goes, you know, because of course I like looking at things from the medium perspective, you know, the spiritualist, but my husband also is a scientist. So we kind of pull that together. And in our world, in the paranormal ghost hunting world, you know, they really were the first pioneers, not only spiritually, but also to set up for, you know, the ghost hunting that we know now, ways to communicate, you know, different types, debunking, respect, showing respect to the spirits, provoking what's too far. You know, a lot of their techniques have been carried on and are still in use today, which is really incredible when you think about that too, from, you know, the 1800s to now. And we're still using some of the methods that they use, which is, it's really cool.
That is, you know, I've never thought of that before, so thank you, because that's like kind of amazing.
It really is. Like I said, it's the way that they got them to trigger objects and manipulate tools, and the wrapping to response questions, and it's really neat.
Well, one thing that they did that really fascinated me is they used the alphabet. And when they got to the right letter, you know, ding, ding, winner, winner, chicken dinner. And they were able to form words and sentences and whatnot through using the alphabet.
Yeah.
Like I said, the biggest thing too is you know, one rap for yes, two for no, you know, that sort of thing. You know, like I said, now we still do those things. You still get, you know, locations where you can get knocking. We still get locations, almost every location we get to, we can have, you know, flashlights manipulated and turned on and off to questions and different things. Like I said, they really did set the way, you know, like I said, with spirit, and always being respectful, and the importance of that. And, you know, like I said, that's huge. Again, if you think about the time, and it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool.
If anybody has anything to add or any questions, please let us know.
Well, you know, and what I find so fascinating too is, and maybe this is why sometimes I wonder if some of the mediumship sometimes gets a bad name. I truly believe that most spirit won't out people out of the closet. Like, they're not going to bring out all your dirty laundry and put it on display for everybody. I don't believe in that. However, there are some things that maybe like it happened to Margaret the mother in that conversation, how many kids do you have? And she rapped 6 and she's like, no, I got 5. Well then, oh, wait a minute, she lost one in infancy, so I mean, first that proves intelligence, that it proves spirit is intelligent and knows, like, here's this random stranger, really, no family connection ties at all to the Fox family, except for that building, and knew exactly how many kids.
It's incredible.
She really had. It is.
Wow.
It is really cool. And that's, and when I was doing more research and reading into things too, like Maggie and Kate both, there's 2 forms of mediumship in spiritualism, the mental and the physical, right? And the physical is using our 5 physical senses. Mental's using more of like the medium as the filter for the information in between. But physical can be done with, seen, touched, felt with our 5 physical senses. And they had so much physical mediumship going on, because it wasn't just wrappings, like you said, it was of objects.
Right.
Maggie did slate writing. I didn't even know that. I just found that out just a couple weeks ago when I was reading an article in an old newspaper about how she was doing automatic slate writing. So this, like, in the middle of the circle, the slate, images would appear, words would appear on these slates with no chalk even in the room.
Yeah.
Which was quite fascinating. And then they also dipped into the mental mediumship aspect of it too, in some ways. But can you imagine how long those seances took by using them?
I can't, no. And like I said, and in my experience with ghost hunting and with the paranormal and everything, it's amazing how spirit will tailor to the environment. Like in that situation, it was very necessary to have more physical things happen because it's too easy to write off the mental. And so they needed to have the physical so that the people coming could go, there's no way they did that. There's, it's harder to debunk. And even to this day, we'll take groups in different places that are deemed safe, with a team. And for example, we took a team in once that was all hearing impaired from RIT. And at first I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what did I just get myself into? Because how, as a guide, for this ghost hunt for them, how am I going to, a lot of our stuff's audible. We have the Frank's box and ghost boxes and stuff where they can hear the live EVPs, or we record things and then hearing, and they can't hear. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck are we going to do? And I'd hunted this one location 100 times, and that night we had more flashlights turn on and off. We had more, we have some tools that'll vibrate, different things that they could participate in. Half of them left with their batteries completely drained on their hearing aids. That wasn't a good thing. But it amazes me to this day that how spirit will tailor, answers and responses. All the way back to that point. It's incredible.
It is. Well, what an intelligence that is, and that's really what, that date, those women, those girls took us from ancient, the unknowing, the mysterious, unsure where it comes from, supernatural, miraculous communication, to intelligence, just modern. That's why we call it modern spiritualism. We know that these spirits have intelligence because they can respond, they can like you were saying, shift the perspective, and change it. And I just think it's awesome. I really do. I am such a fan of this kind of stuff. I can't get enough of it. Like I
am too.
Well, because I feel like, so many times when you search, like if you Google search or Wikipedia, Fox Sisters and Spiritualism, the first things that come up is like their recantation, like how they, denounce spiritualism. And that was 1 year of their entire life. So how can you ignore all of these decades before and not get the whole story, because it was that one tidbit of information that, you know, whoever deems what we do is unhealthy or whatever,
Right.
and they took that one moment and ran with it without
Yeah.
even just seeing everything that they did for us, you know, or everything that they did for the movement, you know, and women in general. I mean, think about it, because, you know, I mean, just, we had, I'm trying to remember the statistic, and I just was reading it about suffrage from 1850 to 1910, like the amount of women that were working was in a huge increase. And a lot of them were doing mediumship. I mean, it really freed the women.
Well, you know, the other thing that gets me with, the whole recant thing is that we have to think back at the time and the era and what was going on. We were not in their arena to know what they may or may not have been going through, that may have, aside from everything we've talked about, that may have contributed to that. You know, were they being persecuted in some way? Were they being threatened in some way? You know, there's a lot that goes into it.
There was a fine line between that and a witch. I mean, you're not talking a big difference in time there too. I mean, they really did put themselves on the line. And I think Jen just made a comment about that. Yeah, it gave them a public voice. It really did. But man, what they risked to pull that off. I think that's a lot. That's a big risk.
In 1893, which is like just months, well, March of 1893 is when Maggie passed, and same year that Kate passed, but it was the same year that the National Spiritualist Association became a legal, official, spiritualism became a legal religion, you know, with you know, with the, you know, government, with Washington, D.C. It's actually acknowledged as now a organized, in a way, you know, defined religion. But yeah, it gave, and for a lot of women, you know, I mean, they really paved the way for all women to, you know, to stand in their truth. And it would be interesting to see, you know, because I'm doing the research of all these different, I think we're going to have a few problems in a couple states about, I need to find an Alaskan medium and a Hawaiian medium, but I think we can do it.
I knew Hawaii was a problem.
All right.
I'm still in training, but if you need me to go to Hawaii and shake something up, you let me know. I'm willing to take it on.
Good.
You pipe down, you're stuck with the crew.
But, you know, at the same time, you know, at the same time in the 1890s, 1880s, Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa, Kansas, we all started having spiritualist societies too, that were really, the majority were women, children, because the women brought their kids with. So, I mean, it was common for kids to sit in seance circles. And can you imagine what that would be? I think it's awesome. Like, my daughter now will go to school and talk about seance circles, and they're all like,
oh, don't even get me started. I've had more awkward parent-teacher conferences. The first 2 minutes are, so Kayla needs to work on her Spanish grade, but here's the cool thing. They told me you're a ghost hunter. And I'm like, oh, crap. Like, oh, here we go. You know what I mean? Like, here we go. And it turns into that whole conversation. So, yeah. I know. We're like, I told you to shut your mouth.
So Leah, I want to recap here. We all want to read Leah Underhill's Missing Link. If you haven't, read that. You need to read the Love Letters of Dr. King.
Missing Link in Modern Spiritualism is the entire title.
Missing Link in Modern Spiritualism? Okay.
The Missing Link in Modern Spiritualism.
Yes.
And Mysterious Noises, right?
Yes, and Mysterious Noises. And I'm just making sure, I'm going through my notes here. You can tell.
Can I ask you a question while you're doing that? One thing I don't know a lot about is whatever happened to John? Did he kind of, you don't hear much about him, the father.
No, you know what? Oh,
Let me
ahead,
tell you the thing we know for sure. Men should be happy that they're all crossed over, because any man that was attached to any of these women died.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, did he knock off earlier? I mean, because you don't hear much about his role, you know?
Yeah, you know, I feel like he did. I don't really pay, because to me, all right, my honest opinion of him is he was a deadbeat dad, just this drunk. So I don't think, you know, he wouldn't be part of the picture for very long. And I do feel like he passed, and now I'm trying to look up the family tree, because I actually have the family tree, but I do believe he passed.
I think there's something about it in the
All right, here's the tree. Let's see. Yeah, well, actually, he died January 1865, and Margaret, mom, died August 1865.
Oh.
So they still have quite a few years after that, you know, of 1848, but yeah, you don't hear much.
I almost choked on my tea. I'm like, if that's quite a few years, I want a whole lot more than that.
Right?
Yeah. No. And you know, there is a brother, David Fox, who also wrote somewhere, and I've only seen a copy of it, and it was a very kind of bad copy. And I don't know where the original is. It's like the holy grail of spiritualism, maybe. You know, like, I feel like we need to, what was that guy's name? That really fun guy where he went on adventures to find things? Indiana Jones. So I feel like maybe we need to be the Indiana girls of spiritualism and go on some adventures, because there's some holy grails that we need to find. But I've heard a rumor, and saw a faint copy of a letter that David actually wrote about the events, like his side of the spiritualist, you know, his sisters being who they were. But he definitely did say that his sisters had the capability of connecting to some supernatural, you know, energy or something like that. But he calls Charles B. Rosna by a different name, which has always kind of been under debate.
Interesting.
Doyle calls him Rosma, if you read the history of spiritualism. And then you heard Rosna, and then, you know, so there's different, some different fun, you know, again, like, we just don't think to document. How much of your development, how much of your spirit communication have you documented?
A lot.
Well,
That's
yeah.
good, Andy. That's good.
But the details connecting with spirit and stuff, like you said, you know what I mean? It's just there and then it's gone, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Very
I don't
cool.
know. I just can't get enough of it. Like I said, read, just, you know, every book you can. I've even read, like, and for me, I like to read the, you know, the opposing teams. So The Death Blow to Spiritualism is a good book to read, because that's all about the recanting. That's all about the statement of false, you know, of Maggie's interview type of thing. Because again, you can never get enough information, and then you start to piece together the puzzle, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, you know, like, they didn't get the whole story, you know, they didn't look, and they didn't, you know, plan it out like in a timeline. You know, it makes it sound like it all happened in 1 year. No, this is decades later. And Randy made a really good point about, we don't know personally what they've been through. Look
Right.
at how many mediums, in a way, have been tortured for scientific purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tie you to this chair. I'm going to strip you of your clothes. You know, and in a time when you showed your ankles, you were a sinner. I mean, come on, you know, so who knows what kind of daily abuse they had to take. All the places maybe they were unwelcomed in because of who they were or what they did. You know, think about that just in your own little bit of experience. I mean, how many times have you said to somebody, oh, I'm a spiritualist, and they go, oh, you know, like, don't curse me.
Already done.
What's that?
Yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
Mm-hmm.
Which gets me to, don't even get me started about the whole Houdini Doyle scandal, because I think there's way more to that too than meets the eye.
Wow.
I've been digging in that.
Who are we doing next? I think we should do Andrew next.
Oh, all right. Absolutely. We consider him the father of modern spiritualism, though he was never a spiritualist, ever.
That's what we should do next.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he really set the way, I think, for trance work. I think he should be the father of trance, personally, in my own opinion. Because that's what I want to call him, anyways. I always think it's funny, like, why do you say somebody's the father of spiritualism when he was never a spiritualist? But I guess he did have that profound moment where he did, in the exact morning hours, you know, write that quote, which just makes me, every time I read it, I get goosebumps, because I just think there the work has begun. And here we are, and what are we? July 20th of 2020, and we're paving the way for the future.
Ooh, look at 2020.
You know, so how cool, like, you know, and then we'll have to pass the torch and, you know, and hopefully keep it going just to honor these people, you know. I think, like, you know.
Yeah.
History
is very important. History is very important.
Yes, who knows, Randy, in 150 years, there could be a group of people sitting down going, you know, this Randy Sands and her mediumship crew, let's watch this video.
Oh. That, okay.
You know that Leanne, she's sitting in jail somewhere. She poked a voodoo doll with like an eyeball or I don't know, something, you know?
All right, so next month, the third Monday of next month is going to be Andrew.
Which is perfect. His birthday's August 11th, so I always celebrate the whole month, so you might as well celebrate the whole month.
But we're not going to call him the father of trance because, you know, as an LGBTQ,
it's too close.
I hear trance and I start giggling. You know,
Spiritualism, so that's all right.
Right.
And there was one, oh, and you know, these adventures, I think that's a really good idea. And as a matter of fact, the crew and I were talking about doing an adventure in April of next year. We are going to go to the Herkimer Diamond Mines, and whoever wants to join us is welcome. But then we're going to do a paranormal thing near Rochester.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that joins us is welcome.
Yeah, we've got some pretty cutting edge equipment and stuff that we've been trying out. I can't talk a lot about it right now, but we've been working with some really cool stuff that you guys would not want to miss. It's phenomenal.
The top secret equipment?
Huh?
The top secret equipment?
Our team gets approached often with different types of equipment and stuff to try out. And let me tell you what, this new one, it's going to be, I need to have it for my Christmas present this year. It's freaking cool. So
yeah, okay. And then we're talking about doing a spiritual retreat in the Azore Islands in 2021.
Where's that?
When you start seeing the Azores, you're going to be like,
beautiful.
It's between here and Portugal.
That come out of the that are hot from the volcanoes.
So we're purposely scheduling it a little ways out because obviously, one, there's a lot going on right now. Two, it takes time to save up to make that kind of a trip. I mean, believe it or not, it's actually pretty cost efficient there, price wise and stuff. The most expensive part will be getting there, but it is stunning. Just Google it. It's just a stunning place.
It's not that expensive. I mean, and even somebody on a budget can start putting a few dollars aside, and when you get there, everything's extremely reasonable. Dinner like $8.
Cool.
Yeah. We're looking at a combination of spiritual stuff and some paranormal stuff as well. So it'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Well, because now I'm not going to get over. Thank you, Leanne, for just adding another perspective to the sisters starting paranormal investigation.
Yeah.
Another check on why we love them so much. That's why we love the Fox family.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the recording, and we can all hang out a bit if we want to. So thank you for joining us. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the like button, or the subscribe button, I should say. And if you know anybody that may find value in this, please by all means share. And have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.